Hello and welcome to another chess video. Today I'm going to go over a student game, and you'll notice that I'm leaving the my notation and commentary here on the right side, so that you understand how you should be annotating your own games and how your comments should look like. The main theme and the reason why I chose this student game was because I felt it illustrated how to play with the center and how to play against the center. And there were multiple examples where both people misplayed. Either they pushed their center too fast, or they allowed their center to be undermined. And either they allowed their center to be undermined, or on the converse side, the opponent didn't take their only chance to undermine the center. And then when they didn't take the chance, they never got the chance again. Excuse me. So with that being said, let's just get started with the game. So the student plays 1d4. Knight of 6, pawn e3, pawn d6, and it's at this point that if you're playing 1d4 as white, usually pawn d6, it signals the King's Indian defense. Even though they're not playing g6 yet, it's pretty obvious that the bishop is not going to come out on this diagonal, right? Because the diagonal's already, it has two black pawns on it. So the bishop's definitely going to come on this side. And if you know that the bishop's going to come over there, you don't play bishop d3. Against the King's Indian, you want to play bishop e2. The reason being that later on, they play e5, and you don't want your bishop on d3 and your knight on f3, because then they can run into a fork. We have seen examples of this in other lessons, although the situation will not come up today in today's game. But you should be putting your bishop on e2 against the King's Indian setup. So bishop d3, g6, knight f3 was played. Before g6 was played, there's already an immediate equalizer with pawn e5. And this has been played before between some top players. And the way their game went was like as follows. Black played pawn d5, and already definitely black is at least equal here. Black has absolutely no problems. He's threatening to play pawn e4. He's going to gain space in the center. This is not what you want to play as white. By the way, normally pawn e5 would not be possible because you would be able to go take, and trade queens, and black won't be able to castle. The problem is that here, because you block the d-file with your bishop, that is no longer possible. So another reason why your bishop should go on e2 when you're playing against the King's Indian defense. But okay, let's continue. They played some more moves. Knight c6. Black is playing really well. He's playing all the right King's Indian moves. White plays pawn a3 to prevent any knight b4 shenanigans. And here was sort of a slow move. And if you're playing the King's Indian, you really need to hit them fast. You need to hit them hard, and you can't hesitate. You should be playing as actively as you possibly can. So pawn e5, if you can play it, you should play it the first moment you get. It required no preparation. And next, you're already going to be threatening this and this. And we already talked about this being the reason why the bishop doesn't go into d3. Because most of the time, it's just going to get hit if you're playing this setup. So the line could continue pawn e5, b4, threatening pawn b5, and also to develop your bishop this way. Queen e7 was a line, sorry, but pawn a6 was what I looked at. And yeah, so now you're threatening pawn e4 to fork the knight and the bishop. White has to react somehow, so this is how you can react. Before recapturing, black plays this nice in-between move, knight g4, making use of the pin on the long diagonal. He recaptures this way, and black has a very active position. Usually black gets his pieces on these squares, but white has a lot more central control. So for example, in the King's Indian, white would have pawns on these squares, and black would still be happy. So if you get this position with black and white does not have central control, you really can't ask for more if you're King's Indian player. So hold on, let me just get rid of those circles. So that's how black should have played. He played a little slowly though. He played rook e8, and this gives white some time. So yeah, white played just a normal consolidating developing move. It should be said that b4 has the same idea and it's a little bit more aggressive. Just because you play b3 in like 80% of your games doesn't mean that you shouldn't consider pawn b4 if it looks like an aggressive option. So nothing wrong with pawn b4, but also pawn b3 uh, is a decent move, getting all our pieces out. And yeah, now white faces this problem with pawn e4. And normally he wouldn't really care so much about it. He wouldn't have to react. But in this case, you do have to take some preventative measures. So he trades. He trades. He hits the rook. Yeah, at multiple points, I think the better recapture would have been to recapture with the pawn. And then you're still threatening e4. So definitely black is not worse in these kinds of positions. But this one was played. And by the way, this was a blitz game. So I'm not going to be too critical of the players because they did not have a lot of time to make these decisions. They were playing a 3-minute game with 2-second increment, which means that after every move they make, they gain 2 seconds on the clock. So while I'm critical of some positional moves, I'm not going to be as critical as I would be if this was a tournament game. Bishop g4 was kind of a waste of time because the bishop went back to d7, so he could have done that in one move, and this move actually, helps helps white create lift with for his king. And now after pawn c6, white gets an advantage. The last chance black had to equalize was bishop c6 here, and after knight d4 he would just go bishop e4, and you get some more trades in. Of course, if he trades already, I'm starting to like black's position. Pawn c5 comes to mind. So black is very active there and has absolutely no problems. So bishop c6 was a good opportunity to equalize. But after pawn c6, which is a little more passive, white takes this moment and does a good job in taking the initiative. So now he's just going to roll through the center. He's going to push, 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 and crack that king open. So let's see how that happens. Black plays logically. He set up pawn d5, so he played it anyway. And then white goes on ahead with pawn e5. All this is best play. Knight h5 was a good move. And pawn c4, white's just trying to crack open the center. Definitely one move that could have just put him away on the spot was queen d2 here. Preventing knight f4, but also having the sneaky threat of pawn g4, which would trap the knight. So you have to, the knight needs a square. Black would move his bishop somewhere, and then you just consolidate. And eventually the knight has to come back anyway to g7 sooner or later. So let's do it now. And then pawn c4 is very similar to the game, but look at black's pieces. This bishop, kind of not a very happy piece, but this knight on g7 is even sadder. Both of them not happy pieces. And so I would have a huge advantage in that position. So pawn c4, I mean, the idea is good. It's just that there's a more incisive way of breaking down the black position, and a more incisive way of making use of an offsides piece and making sure it remains offsides. Because in the game, the knight got back into the center, and this gives black enough counterplay to stay in the game. Usually, if black gets a knight onto f4 in King's Indian defenses, it's a very good sign for black. And in many positions, actually, black even sacrifices a pawn to get a knight to f4. So queen c8, he's preparing some sacrifices on h3. And while I don't believe it, and I don't think it's like objectively great, in a blitz game is always a very scary thing to face if you're white. By the way, this is a very instructive moment where black has a better move. And so black is facing the possibility of being rolled over in the center. He's possibly going to drop a pawn on d5. Sometimes pawn e6 becomes a threat. Uh, this is a good moment to take action in the center and fight for the center. So you can pause the video right here and think about, what move would you play? What do you think is the best move in this position? Now, if you're still watching, I'm going to tell you the answer. The best move in this position is actually, it might look a little weird to some people at first, but pawn f6 undermines white's central pawn. And white has to act right now because black will just capture it. So you capture, black captures, you can trade some rooks. This is just an example line. These moves are not necessarily forced, but they do make sense. And after white captures here, you can go rook d8, and black has an active position, no problems. His light square bishop will come to f7. And because his queen is covering the dark squares, his king should not be in any real danger. So queen c8 is played, white captured, and then we go for it. We go for it as black. He didn't have to panic. He had another move at his disposal. He could have just recaptured. Sorry. He could have just recaptured here. And the game could have continued like this. Rook e3. Teeing up for the sacrifice, preparing it, getting a rook to cover horizontally on the rank. And bishop h6 is a good move. You can blockade, attack the queen, and pawn b4. And it's starting to look like white has a good position. He's consolidating. He's gaining control, and he's going to try to play against this isolated queen's pawn. The computer says that this position is equal, but unless there's something concrete, something direct right now, I really do like white's position. So I think it's easier to play as white there, despite the computer thinking it's equal. So after bishop takes h3, he pushes. So this is a very interesting example. By the way, just to humor the viewers and myself, I didn't actually check what happens if the bishop is captured, but I assume that this is a forced mate. Yeah, I don't see how you defend against this. So we could just agree that that isn't possible. Bishop takes h3. And so in this position, you should start thinking to yourself, how would you play this? How would you take advantage of your central space and your two connected central pawns to blow open black's position? You can pause the video at this point to think about what you would play. The correct move is pawn to d6, the obvious threat. Pawn to d7. In certain circumstances, to fork the queen and the rook after the bishop is no longer in h3. Queen in g4, you have to calculate this though. It runs pretty close. And once again, I'm not going to blame the players because this was a blitz game. But if you do calculate it correctly, this trades the queens. And then you consolidate and you're basically just up a piece. Notice that these pawns are very solid. You even have pawn f4. So that pawn chain is just like unbreakable. I would even sacrifice some stuff for this pawn structure. And yet you not only have the pawn structure, but you're also up a piece. Notice how solid this pawn structure is, as opposed to the pawn structure on light squares, where it can be attacked by the black pieces. So it's a wrong pawn push. Here, you can see that the black pieces, they're on the light squares, and they're sort of attacking it from all angles. So the pawns are quite vulnerable. And actually here, black has a winning position. Bishop takes g2 was played, but the better move was just bishop takes b2. And actually, white just lost a piece. There's no really good follow-up. For example, if e takes f7, check, king takes, Knight g5 check. You actually just run out. You're still down a piece, and you run out of attackers. The king is absolutely safe. And moreover, you know, queen g4 is coming. The rook is hanging. This is absolutely winning for black. So that was a moment for the opponent to take advantage of the center being pushed prematurely, or the center being pushed in the wrong way. So you have to be careful when you're playing with the center. Now black made the wrong capture, and he took the pawn. And now white won. Knight g5 check. And he took here, and there's going to be one more critical moment. Bishop takes g7, loses. So white played bishop takes g7, and I want you to pause the video one last time and think about, after bishop takes g7, how does black win? And it just comes to show that when you're putting away a game, you need to be very careful, especially in sharp positions like this, where the king is very weak. You have to be very careful and make sure that you don't lose, because it's very easy to miss a tactic. So after bishop takes g7, I hope you found the move. That's what was played. I hope you found the move queen. Oh, sorry, hold on. What was the move? Oh, it was rook takes e1 first, of course. So rook takes e1, deflecting the queen away from the g4 square. So now you have queen g4. And white cannot stop the discovered check. And so that's going to lead quickly to mate. Notice also this knight does a wonderful job of blocking the queen e6 check, which otherwise would save white. And so in this position, black is winning. So an innocent capture could have lost the game for white. And so just also recapturing, this just lost the game for black. After queen d4 check, white took the knight, and now the smoke clears, and white is up one piece. We trade, and white consolidated. He traded this active bishop off, and he went on to win the game. I hope that you found this video to be instructive. Hold on. Okay. And I just wanted to quickly review the main points here. The first point was that you should put your bishop on e2 when you're playing against the King's Indian defense, if you are going to play with this pawn structure. Oops. If you're going to play with this pawn structure and not with your pawn on c4 and your pawn on e4, if you're going to play with the Kali setup, you need to put your bishop on e2. So the next critical moment was that black could have equalized by pushing his pawn to e5 quickly at several points. He could have played pawn e5 here. He also should have played pawn e5 here to equalize faster. And then, moving on, the last chance black had to equalize was bishop c6 to go to e4. After he played pawn on c6, white had the initiative, and he pushed it very well. Pushed forward. White should have played queen d2 to stop the knight from coming to the active f4 square. Now black has counterplay, and black should have pressured the center with pawn f6. So very nice little tango between the two sides in keeping the center, pushing back into the center, keeping the center, and breaking the center. And so both sides, there's some instructive moments here. But this would be equal for black. So pawn f6 was the last chance. And now we have the sacrifice and the wrong pawn push. So being very careful with the pawn pushes and making sure that you actually have a follow-up if you lose a piece. In this case, white did not. So the last moment, by the way, the last critical moment was here. You do not have to make automatic recaptures. Chess is not checkers. So here, if you realize that you're going to be losing after king takes g7, you should consider all other possible moves, and then you find the very nice takes and queen g4. Black would have won this game. So the way the game ended, though, the piece dropped, and white very nicely consolidated and put his bishop on c4, trading and winning. Thank you for watching this video, and we hope to see you next time.